So, I Love Boosters follows the Velvet Gang, Corvette, played by Keke Palmer, Sadie, played by Naomi Ackie, and Mariah, played by Taylor Page. A trio of Bay Area boosters who steal high-end designer clothes and resell them at a deep discount. Think shoplifters, but for the 21st century, if you've never heard of it. Corvette, played by Palmer, is an aspiring designer who has some really brilliant ideas, but never really managed to execute on them and get to a bigger platform. And she idolizes this fast fashion tycoon, Christy Smith, played by Demi Moore in the film. While she idolizes Christie's designs at Metro Designs, her chain of stores, she doesn't really have a way to break in to the industry. So instead, she's taken to just stealing clothes and reselling them at her own place, along with her friends. The three of them are doing fine, boosting, and Christy Smith and friends are getting madder and madder about it as they approach their new fall show with their brand new fall collection that's going to be a huge hit and change the world of fashion forever. When suddenly, in attempting to lift all of the merchandise from one particular Metro Design stores, our Velvet Gang uncovers another shoplifter with a secret bit of technology from far away in China specifically, who is changing the game and how we steal and repurpose fashion, clothes, and culture. I Love Boosters is from director Boots Riley, who recently did Sorry to Bother You with Lakeith Stanfield. And I'm a Virgo over on Amazon. It is huge and colorful and bombastic and strange. People have said it's like a leftist Looney Tunes. I'm very excited to talk about it. Andy, what did you think of I Love Boosters?
Man, this is one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like this. And I remember I've seen Sorry to Bother You, his previous film, where Lakeith Stanfield is working at a call center and he is told to use his white voice, not his black sounding voice. And he starts getting promoted and they start going really well. And then it takes about halfway through, takes a really, really bizarre turn. I Love Boosters starts bizarre and just gets more bizarre from the very beginning, like hits the ground and you're like, what is going on? You're in these different stores, which are all wildly different colors. There's some sci-fi stuff that reminds me a little bit of Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's weird things like Demi Moore, her office building is at this slanted angle. For some reason, it's never explained. Like it's surrealist cinema, unlike that we've seen in quite some time. Like people aren't allowed to make films like this anymore because they're just too weird and too bizarre. But deep down, we have great performances, but it's about labor rights and worker solidarity. That's essentially what is our main overarching message. And we get a ton of comedy along the way and really great performances. Of course, Keke Palmer is Corvette, the leader of this group, but kind of underplayed. She's not doing high energy, fast talking Keke Palmer. That's kind of what she's known for. It's usually what she's paid to do. She's a lot more kind of subdued and subtle, but it's still a really great performance. And I saw an interview where she said it was challenging because I was asked to do what I don't usually, the opposite of what I usually do. So it's a crazy film. It looks incredible, like you've never seen anything like it visually. It's got a wild soundtrack or score as well. And again, it's got themes and interesting things that it's about. It's not just weird for being weird.
Yeah, it is maximalist cinema, I've heard it described as, which I think is probably an apt way to describe what this is. This has more in common with like Everything Everywhere All at Once and like the Mike Myers Cat in the Hat movie than it does with like much anti-capitalist cinema. It is very unique. It is very strange. I kind of love it. It's got problems for sure. But I so appreciate what the film seems to be trying to say, right? Let your freak flag fly, be an artist and make art and be yourself and don't worry about what other people think, because when you put out something special, like good things will come to you. Like along with a whole lot of class solidarity, like there's some really fantastic stuff happening in here. It's a very funny movie, but I think the thing that really stands out is its production design and its costuming, which production design is already one thing here. Like just to give us an example, Corvette and friends are squatting at Jack's Chicken Shack, I think is the name of it. So we have like an interior apartment from an adapted Chicken Shack. We have, meanwhile, Christy Smith's office, which is entirely at a slant. It's like a 17-degree angle. I was reading they had the set on, and they had Keke Palmer like suspended from a wire so she wouldn't fall, like acting in there, trying to walk up the side of this like rainbow colored office. Which is actually, funnily enough, I read based on like a real building in San Francisco that's on like a tilt, just barely. And they were like, well, why don't we just take that all the way to the edge and talk about this like this building that's like just completely slanted sideways because they're counterculture and different, right? Metro Designs, each store is colored exclusively in one colorway. So we'll have a store that's all green, we'll have a store that's all yellow, a store that's all red. Will Poulter plays a store manager at one of these locations. Delightful, by the way. Will Poulter's
so
hilarious. Great. Another Will Poulter winner, man. The kid can't lose. And so we have like entire stores outfitted with custom colors, makeup, fashion, all of the clothes. Everybody working in them has to have the same colors and still look good. If the production design does not get awards attention, at the very least, this needs to be a contender for costuming. Like the costumes in this are so insane. I cannot believe how good they are. Everybody looks amazing, dressed to the nines, just banger after banger after banger. And I can't believe they did it on a budget too. I read this is a $20 million budget. It's the most Neon's ever spent on a movie, which is crazy. Like Neon has put out a lot of stuff. This is the most they've ever gone in on. And it's weird because Boots Riley, who's been very active on Twitter this weekend. If you were on Twitter last weekend, Boots Riley's been going nuts over there promoting this movie. Good for him. He's getting the word out. It seems to be working. He talked about how he didn't get into Cannes with this. They were like, nope, this is too weird. They didn't want Sorry to Bother You. Nobody wanted to look at I'm a Virgo. And then they also turned this down. Like, nah, this isn't going to do it for us. And it's like, well, Neon seems to think there's something special here. And if he can't get into Cannes, like it's worth mentioning that they're certainly invested. And I think it's because there is something special here. Like this movie is something really unique and strange. And it goes places you don't expect. But God, what are the movies for, right? If not to take us somewhere we've never been. Like, and I think that's really special. I think this manages to take a society we all live in and reframe it through this modern lens of, you know, hey, maybe shoplifters aren't the problem. Like maybe the people with less aren't the real issue here. Maybe it's the people at the top that we need to be talking about. And I think that's really special because God, not enough movies talk about that.
Yeah, like I said, this movie's about workers' rights and workers' solidarity. And one of the things that stands out to me is how the media is used and kind of portrayed to counteract labor movements. You know, there's a couple of kind of throwaway gags. You just see a splint where people are being interviewed on the news and they're saying all these things like, well, I don't want to listen to my coworkers. My boss knows what's best for me. And then there's another guy, and they're literally subtitled as like crying black woman or upstanding citizen. And one of them's like, of course my rent needs to go up. My landlord deserves it. You know, and it's all these kind of how the media kind of uses counter messaging to counter workers' movements. And it's tongue in cheek. It's really funny. And it also, when it first started, I thought it was kind of poking fun at the uselessness of some of these movements. Cause like Isa Gonzalez is in there trying to organize like, the workers of one of the retail stores, and like she has like one friend that's on board and no one else really listens to her. That kind of goes on for a lot. Which, like I said, there's a lot of strong messaging around this in this like satire in this surrealist setting. Yeah,
I love that things look a little cheap in this movie. There's some particular effects towards the end. There's a few car chases using miniatures that like look janky, but then there's some stop motion coming out of the movie that like could have been blended a little bit better, I think, into what's going on here. But apparently on set, Riley was very insistent on this. He said, no, I want it to look a little bit janky. I want this to look handmade. I want it to look a little bit like it's not perfect and polished, because that's the point of the characters in the film. Like the boosters, the Velvet Gang, like are not selling perfect items. They are not presenting a perfect life. Like they are pockmarked and they have problems. And I think that's interesting. And I think the form of the film following the function of the script works really good when we're talking about fashion and design, like which ultimately is the medium in which these characters are kind of moving and expressing themselves. I love this idea of Christy Smith, Demi Moore, being this character who's like quite expletive filled, which I thought was really funny. She's like, these bitches are stealing my stuff. These urban, anyway. Like she thinks that she is doing the world a favor by giving her art to everybody, and meanwhile the boosters say, no, you're oppressing us with what you deem as the standard flavor, and you're not letting other people express themselves and giving space for other people to be themselves and be their own person. Not only customers but employees who work there. that's where some of that class solidarity stuff comes from. Like, I just think it's such a sharp script. I think it's so funny. I'm looking forward to rewatching it. I will say that technology piece I mentioned in the opening gets quite complicated in Act 2. And if you look too hard at that, you're going to see some holes. But you know what? It's fine. Like, it's kind of a metaphorical thing. It's surprisingly Marxist. It's like this 3-function device that I don't really want to give away, that ultimately leads to something that I think is very satisfying. Like, if not messy and wacky. It's definitely wackier than Sorry to Bother You. I haven't watched I'm a Virgo, but it's got to be wackier than that. I can't wait to see what Boots Riley does next. That's how I felt after Sorry to Bother You. I was like, this movie's awesome, and I can't wait to see what he does next. And after this, I'm like, boy, another, like, we need to get this guy at Cannes. This should be the kind of stuff people are talking about. I think this movie is really special.
Yeah, like I said, I've never seen anything like this, and we have a big shortage of surrealist cinema. It's not a genre that Hollywood really supports. You could think of things like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, being John Malkovich, Adaptation, Synecdoche, New York. These things that are like really out there, and like I haven't seen the film like that in a really long time, and it's refreshing to get one, and one that makes sense. Like I said, there's some sci-fi elements. Poppy Liu plays a Chinese worker who ends up coming over to the U.S. and like still fighting for rights at these factories back in China. Everyone's trying to work together for better lives, better wages for workers.
Yeah, everybody's drinking from the same punch bowl, and the quicker we stop looking at each other for causing problems and look at the larger problem collectively, like the better off we'll all be. Andy, would you recommend I Love Boosters?
Yeah, I really would, especially for the cinephile, because it is a bizarre movie. It is weird. Like, I've never seen anything like it. It's got a really bizarre soundtrack, but it's a movie with a lot to say. It looks incredible. It's got a really fun soundtrack by, I can't remember the composer, the musical artist. Never heard anything quite like this as well. Gets a little slow in places, but has an overall strong message about workers' rights. So I'm going to say strong recommend.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this movie. Run, don't walk to a theater. It's weird, and it's got some oddities for sure, but so did like Everything Ever All at Once, and that like practically swept the Oscars when it came out. It is strange, it is colorful, it's bombastic, it's Looney Tunes, it's leftist. Get the big popcorn, all right? You're going to have a good time watching I Love Boosters. It's funny, it's sharp, it's thoughtful. Would recommend I Love Boosters rocks. That's episode 337 of Off Script Film Review, Andy. What are we watching next week?
Next week, we're taking a look at Kane Parsons' Back Rooms, the horror film starring Renata Reinsva and Chiwetel Ejiofor. So excited for this. Lots of buzz.